My name is Elias Ramirez. I'm 68 years old. And I died. Yes. I died in a hospital room in Southern California after months of battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And yet, somehow I'm here alive, telling you this story. But what I saw, what I heard, what I experienced on the other side has shattered everything I thought I knew about faith, God, and eternity. Let me take you to that moment the day it all changed. It had been a long week of chemotherapy. My body was breaking down. My bones ached. My skin was pale and cold. That evening I returned home, sat quietly in the living room while my wife Fatima made tea. But something felt wrong. My chest tightened. Not pain, but pressure. Crushing, suffocating, unbearable. I stood up, called her name, but my voice came out broken. My legs collapsed beneath me. The world tilted. Darkness pulled me down like a tide, and I felt myself slipping away. I could hear her screaming. I could hear my daughter crying. Then nothing. Silence. And then I opened my eyes. But it wasn't the hospital room. It wasn't earth. It was silence, pure white, overwhelming silence. I was floating weightless. There was no ceiling, no floor. Only light. Bright, but not blinding. Warm, but not hot. It wrapped around me like a soft blanket. And I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Below me I saw my body on the hospital bed. I saw nurses running. Defibrillator paddles. CPR. I saw my wife clutching my hand. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't panicking. I was watching. Just watching. Detached but aware. I asked myself, is this death? Is this what it feels like to die? Then something changed. A tunnel of light appeared in the distance. I couldn't tell if I was being pulled or if I was choosing to go, but I moved toward it. As I drew closer, I heard voices. My mother's lullabies. The prayers I had recited as a boy in Mindanao. The echo of the Quran spoken softly in my grandfather's study. The memories surrounded me, embraced me, led me forward. And then I was there. It looked like paradise. Lush green fields, trees with fruit I had never seen. Water so clear it shimmered like crystal. The peace, it was overwhelming. I fell to my knees and whispered, "Praise be to Allah who brought me here." I thought my suffering was over. I thought I had passed the test. But then, something began to shift. The sky darkened. The trees withered. The fruit on the branches shriveled to dust. A terrible stench, decay, rot, death filled the air. I stood up, heart racing. What was happening? Where was the peace? The light. Cries rose from the distance. Children crying. Women wailing. Men shouting. It was chaos, pain, agony. And in the midst of it, one voice called out louder than all. "Have mercy, have mercy." It was my mother's voice. My soul shattered. I turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. Shadows surrounded me. I could no longer see the path. Up and down ceased to exist. My thoughts were screaming. I am Imam Elias. I served my people. I led prayers for decades. I have been faithful. Why am I here? Then a voice cut through the void. It was not loud, but it thundered inside me. Deep, eternal, unshakable.
Elias, everything you thought you knew is about to be tested.
My knees gave out. I could feel myself falling, but there was no ground to catch me. The peace was gone. The light had turned. I was no longer in paradise. I was somewhere else, somewhere between the known and the terrifying unknown. And this was just the beginning. Before I tell you what came next, you need to understand who I was. My name is Elias Ramirez. I was born in a dusty village outside Cotabato City in the southern Philippines. My childhood was quiet, humble, and full of questions. My father was a school teacher, a gentleman who read the Quran every morning before sunrise. My mother Salma was a healer, someone the village came to when medicine failed. I was their only son, and from an early age, I knew I was different. While other boys played outside, I was the one sitting in the mosque, watching the old Imam recite verses with tears in his eyes. Something stirred in me every time I heard the call to prayer. It wasn't just ritual. It was power. It was mystery. It was sacred. I still remember the first time I tried to memorize Surah Al-Fatiha. My lips trembled, but I felt something pass through me, a weight and a wonder I couldn't describe. At age 12, I began leading youth prayers. At 14, I memorized the entire Quran. By 17, people called me Little Sheikh. At 23, I was chosen to become the youngest assistant imam in our city. I should have been proud. I should have felt holy. But there was always a whisper in the back of my mind, questions I dared not voice. Why were there contradictions in what we taught and what we lived? Why did peace seem so distant even among the faithful? Still, I buried those thoughts. I told myself they were tests, and I passed every test. I married Fatima, a devout and compassionate woman, and we had 3 children, each a blessing. When unrest spread across Mindanao, we fled to Manila, and later, by God's mercy, we were accepted as immigrants to the United States. There, I thought we would begin again. In California, I became the head imam of a growing mosque. I led Friday prayers, taught Arabic classes, counseled families through loss and hardship. People came to me for answers, and I gave them, confidently, firmly. But inside, I was tired. There were nights I sat in the mosque, alone staring at the minbar, asking silently, God, are you truly near? Or have I only built my life around echoes? But each time I began to doubt something would happen. An answered prayer, a recovered child, a peaceful funeral, and I would force the doubts back into the corners of my soul. Then came the cancer. I was 67 when the doctors gave the diagnosis stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It hit like lightning. No warning. No chance of cure. I remember the doctor's lips moving, but all I heard was a roar in my ears. Death was no longer theoretical. It had come, and suddenly everything I had preached to others was now preached back to me. Trust in God. Your life is in His hands. There is a reason for everything. I repeated those words like mantras. But when I lay in the hospital bed at night, looking at the ceiling and feeling the cold IV drip through my arm, I felt something else creeping in fear. Not of pain, not of death, but of the unknown. What if I had built my entire life on the wrong foundation? My wife stood by me. She read to me from the Quran when I was too weak. My daughter Amira sang to me quietly. My son Kareem flew in from Michigan to be by my side. The community brought food, prayed, donated for my medical bills. Outwardly, I looked like a man being carried by faith. But inside, I was beginning to sink. There was one night I can't forget. I had just finished chemotherapy. My body was trembling, my breath shallow. I lay on the hospital bed, listening to the sound of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. And I whispered, Allah, if this is my night, let me die in peace. My eyelids grew heavy, my vision dimmed, and then silence, weightlessness, light, and the beginning of what you already heard. Now you know, I wasn't just a man who died. I was a man who built his whole life on faith, and then stepped beyond it. I was a man who had all the answers, until the moment the questions became real. That night when I left my body, I wasn't just leaving the hospital. I was leaving everything I thought I believed behind. And what I encountered next would change the course of my eternity. I remember it not as a dream, but as something more real than anything I'd ever lived through. The moment my breath stopped, everything around me dissolved: the walls, the machines, the pain. It was as if I had passed through a thin veil. 1 second I was a dying man on a hospital bed. The next I was weightless aware and fully awake in a place that didn't seem to exist in time or space. I hovered above my own body. I saw the nurses rushing the alarms, blaring my wife, screaming my name. But I felt no fear, only a strange stillness. No panic, no confusion. Just a quiet separation, like slipping out of a coat and leaving it on a chair. Then came the light. At first it was far like a star on the horizon, but it pulsed with warmth. It called to me, and as I moved toward it without effort, I began to hear something. A hum, soft and low, like a lullaby sung by 1,000 voices. It wasn't in Arabic. It wasn't in any language I knew. And yet, I understood it. Every note carried emotion, grief, joy, worship, longing. Then the memories came. Flashes of my childhood. My first prayer. The face of my grandfather as he whispered Quran verses into my ear. I saw my children being born, my wife weeping in joy. I saw the faces of those I had helped, those I had failed. Everything unrolled like a sacred scroll. No detail spared, no secret hidden. And then the light shifted. What was once golden turned gray. The warmth grew cold. I slowed down, hesitant. Something was different. In the center of this dimming world stood a massive gate, not of iron, but of something ancient and unknown. Beyond it, I saw shadows, flickers of flame, and heard cries, echoes of voices. Some familiar, others alien. I wanted to retreat, but I couldn't. A voice spoke.
Elias, you were not called to walk this path in fear. You are here to witness truth.
The voice was unlike anything I had ever known. Not thunderous but full. Not commanding but absolutely authoritative. It was the sound of both justice and mercy intertwined. When it spoke my name, something in me broke. I looked up. There, seated upon a vast unmeasurable throne, was a figure I could not define. Light radiated from him, not light that hurt, but one that revealed. It stripped me bare, every motive, every lie, every moment I had justified in the name of religion. I could feel his gaze, not judging, not condemning, but seeing. And near the throne, I saw someone I recognized immediately, the Prophet Muhammad. But he was not as I had imagined. His robes were torn, his hands bound in chains of light, his face weeping. I fell to my knees undone. This must be wrong, I shouted in my mind. How can this be? He is the messenger, the chosen one. Why is he bound? Why is he in sorrow? The prophet looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow and compassion, and without speaking, I understood. It wasn't punishment. It was grief, not for himself, but for us, for what we had done, for what we had turned his message into. The voice spoke again.
The messenger pointed toward the light, but men built walls around his words. They took freedom and made chains. They took mercy and forged weapons.
I sobbed, not with my body, but with my soul. Every defense I had built collapsed. My years of teaching, debating, defending, all hollow before this truth. Then, the ground cracked beneath me. A book fell from above, like a comet. It slammed into the earth and opened pages, turning by themselves windless yet forceful. It was the Quran. But something was happening. Images rose from its pages. Visions of pre-Islamic rituals. Idols around the Kaaba. Names of deities I had only read about in history, Allat al-Uzza, and another, Baal, and beneath that the name El, then Allah. My heart pounded. The voice asked again.
Have you ever questioned what you inherited? Or have you only repeated?
I couldn't answer. I trembled.
Truth is not tradition. Truth is not heritage. Truth is me.
And in that moment I saw a glimpse of him. Not as a prophet, not as a man in robes, but as radiance, pure, glorious, like the sun rising inside your soul. And I knew, without being told, this was Jesus, the one Christians claim, the one I was warned against, the one my heart had never dared to consider. And yet, he was here, more real than my own breath, more alive than anything I had ever felt. He reached toward me not with wrath, but with peace.
You do not stand condemned, Elias. You are being awakened.
That was the moment everything shattered. Not just my doctrine, but my identity, who I was, what I had lived for. I had met the truth, and it had a name. I stood frozen in that celestial place as the radiant light of Jesus slowly faded into a vast and overwhelming silence. But this silence was not empty. It was heavy, pregnant with a divine tension, as if the entire cosmos was holding its breath. Suddenly, the sky above me, if you could call it a sky, split open like a veil torn down the middle. And what unfolded before me wasn't just a vision. It was a divine unveiling, a panoramic revelation, stretching across all corners of time and space. Before my eyes, the earth appeared suspended in darkness, but it was not the peaceful blue sphere I had seen in photographs. This earth trembled. Storms raged violently over continents. Fires blazed in forests and cities alike. Seas churned with chaos. And above it all, a strange darkness crept in. Not merely the absence of sunlight, but a spiritual eclipse smothering humanity's hope. Then I saw people, millions, billions, all moving, running, screaming, praying. Some with their eyes wide in terror, others glazed in apathy. I saw nations gathered in confusion, arguing over what had gone wrong. Was it climate? Was it war? Was it technology gone mad? I watched leaders stand before cameras giving confident speeches with trembling hands. I saw marketplaces with digital signs that suddenly went black. Banks closed. Electricity grids flickered. A strange silence settled over the world. Not physical silence, but the collapse of noise that once distracted everyone from the truth. Then I saw one man, young, charismatic, standing tall above a crowd. His voice was like thunder and honey combined. People cheered for him, trusted him, worshipped him. His image appeared on every screen. His message sounded like unity, peace, progress. But I could feel it. It was deception wearing a crown. A mark glowed on his right hand. And those who followed him had the same mark, bright at first, then turning dark as ash. I turned to Jesus in panic.
Elias, what you see is not far, it is near. The world will seek peace without truth, progress without repentance, and unity without love. And for this it will fall.
A tremor shook the ground beneath me. I saw churches. Some were filled with people crying out, truly repenting hands lifted in surrender. Others were entertainment halls, flashing lights, hollow sermons. No mention of me, Jesus said.
Many will say, my name, but they do not know me. They speak of grace, but hide from holiness. They preach freedom, but refuse my cross.
Then came the children. I saw schools where young minds were being fed lies, truth replaced by opinions, identity, twisted purity, mocked. I wept. I saw mothers pleading fathers silenced, and youth caught in a web of confusion and digital addiction. A generation enslaved by their own screens, scrolling away their souls.
If my people do not rise, this generation will be lost to artificial light.
I saw wars erupt, not just with weapons but with ideologies. Brother against brother, truth against truth. And then, a great silence followed by a single trumpet blast, not loud but clear, cutting through dimensions. The heavens cracked again, and I saw a figure riding a white horse clothed in light, fire in his eyes, a sword in his mouth, crowns upon his head. And behind him, an army not of flesh but of glory. My soul trembled.
I will return, but not as a teacher, not as a prophet. I will return as king.
And I knew I had witnessed what many feared to speak of. The end was not doom for those who believe it was glory, but for those who trusted in their own pride, it would be terror. Then Jesus turned to me.
Now you understand, Elias. The time is short. What you saw must be told. Speak it with boldness, clothe it in love, but do not delay.
I fell to the ground, unable to stand under the weight of the vision, not out of fear, but awe. The vision slowly faded, but its imprint was etched into my being forever. And then, just as quickly as it had come, I felt myself pulled away from that holy place, back toward the realm I once knew. I resisted wanting to stay, but his voice reached me one last time.
Go. I am with you always, even to the end of the age.
I woke up gasping for air, as if I had been underwater for hours. My chest rose violently. Machines beeped beside me. Nurses were shouting. A light above burned my eyes, but nothing could compare to the brilliance I had just left behind. My first instinct was to lift my hands and check, am I truly back? The hospital ceiling stared down at me like a stranger. I blinked rapidly. My mind was still in the clouds of eternity, yet my body was now confined again by gravity, by time, by pain. My wife Maria stood at the side of my bed, tears streaming down her face. She kept repeating my name. Elias, Elias, you're alive. The doctor called it a miracle. My heart had stopped for more than 4 minutes. I should have suffered brain damage paralysis, or worse. But all my scans were normal. I heard the whispers in the hallway. We lost him, and he came back whole. They had no explanation, but I did, and I couldn't keep it inside. The very next day, I asked for a notebook. My hands trembled as I began writing. Every word burned through me like fire. I recounted every moment Jesus' voice, the vision of the earth, the mark on the hand, the children's pain, the blinding light, the throne, the horseman. I couldn't stop. I wrote until my fingers ached. But as the hours passed, a heavy weight settled on me. Doubt. Not doubt in what I saw, but in how it would be received. Who would believe me? Who was I? Just a former teacher. A cancer patient. A man with no religious title, no theological degree. Why would anyone listen to me? I stared at the page. Would they mock me? Dismiss me as delusional? Would I lose my job, my friends, my reputation? That night, Maria sat by my bed again. I told her everything. At first, she was quiet. She held my hand. Then she said something I'll never forget. If Jesus showed it to you, it's not for hiding. He trusted you. I wept. Her faith steadied me. But outside that hospital room, things were different. When I returned home, our church invited me to speak. They had heard I'd seen something while I was in cardiac arrest. I stood before the small congregation, heart pounding like war drums in my chest. Could I really say this out loud? I began slowly. My name is Elias Ramos, and I died. Gasps filled the room. I saw the King of Kings, and he showed me what is coming. I spoke for 20 minutes. My voice shook. Some eyes were wide, others filled with tears. But a few were skeptical. Their faces hardened, their lips pursed. After the service, the pastor pulled me aside. That was powerful, he said, but maybe keep it symbolic next time. Metaphoric. Metaphoric. It was real. I was there. The following week, I was uninvited from leading Bible study, then from the prayer team. Some said they were concerned about my mental health. One deacon told me plainly, "Brother, you might be possessed. Jesus doesn't talk like that." That's when the real battle began. Not with the devil, but with the church. I started receiving anonymous messages online, accusations, scripture thrown like stones. I had people call me a false prophet, a deceiver, a man led by emotion. Somehow it hurt more than the cancer. I walked in the garden one morning, crying silently. I wanted to give up. I whispered, "Lord, did I misunderstand you? Did I speak too soon?" That's when I felt it again. His presence. Not a light, not a voice this time. Just peace, deep, anchoring, real.
Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
I opened my Bible, Matthew 5:10. I wasn't alone. In the days that followed, something shifted. Emails began pouring in. A woman from Brazil wrote, "Your story was like my dream. I saw the same man with a crown." A teenager in South Korea said she had been suicidal but changed her mind after watching my testimony. A former Imam from Turkey reached out confessing he had seen a similar vision but never dared to speak. Slowly the tide turned. Videos began circulating. My name was trending not for fame, but for the hunger people had to know what I had seen. They weren't looking for doctrine. They were desperate for hope. And Jesus gave it to them through the broken vessel that I was.
It is not your strength that draws them. It is my truth.
I was no longer afraid. I started hosting small gatherings in our home. Not sermons, just stories, just Jesus. And the people came. Some came out of curiosity, others out of desperation. But one by one, they stayed. They cried. They repented. They were changed. It had begun. Not a revival led by men, but a movement led by the Lamb. The living room of our small home in Quezon City transformed into something sacred. No longer just a space for meals or family talk. It became a meeting place for souls yearning to be free. Each week, more people arrived. Not just neighbors or church friends, but strangers. Mothers holding the hands of rebellious sons. Men who hadn't set foot in a church for decades. Youth who wore doubt like armor. They all came. I didn't preach, I shared. I opened my worn notebook and told them the truth. The voice, the chains on the prophet, the trembling throne, the burning pages, the sorrow and the hope. And I told them about Jesus not as a religion, but as the living one who had looked at me with the truth in his eyes. Some wept openly, others sat frozen silent, but listening. A woman named Teresa approached me after one meeting, her face pale. I dreamed the same darkness she whispered, but I thought it was just guilt from my abortion. You mean, it was more than that? I nodded slowly. Jesus is not trying to condemn you. He's calling you home. She broke into sobs in my arms. Another man, a former seminary teacher, came skeptical. He listened to my testimony with arms crossed, but by the end, his lips trembled. I taught theology for 20 years, he said, but I never met the Jesus you described. Only the doctrine. I told him the doctrine bows before the living presence of Christ. One evening, an entire motorcycle gang showed up. Their leader Rico told me bluntly, "We don't do church, bro. But someone said you saw something that messed with your head. So, mess with ours too." I laughed, not because I wasn't scared, but because I knew Jesus loved people like Rico. I told them about the earth shaking in my vision, the invisible mark on the hand, the weeping children, the stench of deception. They didn't mock me. They didn't laugh. They listened like men standing at the edge of a cliff. When I finished, Rico was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "If even half of what you said is true, we've got no time left." That night, 7 of them gave their lives to Jesus. Not because of me. I was just the echo.
When I am lifted up, I will draw all men to myself.
I remembered that verse as I watched the hardest hearts melt before me. But not everyone celebrated. One local pastor began warning people to avoid our gatherings. He claimed I was spreading fear, that I was manipulating emotions, that dreams and visions are not reliable doctrine. I wanted to defend myself, to call him out. But the Lord reminded me this is not about my reputation. So I prayed for him instead. And then something amazing happened. One night, that same pastor's daughter snuck into our meeting. She sat in the back, hoodie pulled over her head. After the gathering ended, she waited until the room emptied. Then she approached. "Mr. Ramos, my father says you're crazy," she said. But I had the same dream. The withered trees, the voices screaming. The throne. It's real, isn't it? I looked into her eyes and nodded. She fell to her knees. She wasn't the first. She wouldn't be the last. The ripple had begun. People started writing to me from abroad. My story somehow found its way onto a YouTube channel. I didn't even upload it. Someone had recorded one of my small group sharings and uploaded it under the title "Filipino Man Dies and Returns with a Global Prophecy from Jesus." It went viral. Within days, I received thousands of messages from Saudi Arabia, from Colombia, from Australia, from Korea. Many were ex-Muslims, some were atheists. Others were Catholics who hadn't prayed in years. They all had one thing in common. They said something inside them cracked when they heard what I saw. One woman from Germany wrote, "When you said the prophet was in chains, I realized I'd been following a chained version of Jesus all my life. The safe, quiet one in stained glass windows, not the roaring lion of truth." Another message read, "I've lived with so much fear of the end times, but after hearing your voice, I feel peace. Like even in the coming darkness, God's light will still burn." And then there were the skeptics. They filled the comment sections, accused me of hallucination, of attention seeking, of being demonized. Some made edited videos to mock me, but I knew what Jesus told me.
The truth will offend before it transforms.
And so I pressed on. I was invited to speak on a podcast in Manila. The host, a former atheist, gave me 2 hours of airtime. "I don't believe in religion," he said, "but if you're lying, you're the best actor I've ever seen." When the episode ended, he shook my hand. "I'm not ready to believe yet," he confessed, "but for the first time I want to." That was enough for me. Not everyone needs to convert. Some just need to begin searching. A week later, I got a call from a boy in Ilocos. He was 12. His voice cracked with emotion. "Mr. Elias, I had the same vision too. My teacher said I was making it up. But I'm not crazy, right?" I said, "You're not crazy enough. You're chosen." He cried. So did I. It happened again. Just as the sky over Quezon turned a bruised shade of violet, the air too still, too quiet. I had been sitting alone on the rooftop of our home, staring at the horizon, when it returned, not a dream this time, but a vision fully awake. My hands trembled. I knew something divine was drawing near. A sudden wind blew, not cold, not warm, but alive. The cloud shifted, opening like a curtain being drawn by unseen hands. And from the heavens a voice, not loud, but deep, echoing through my bones.
"Elias, the time of trembling has begun, but my people must not fear."
Tears rolled down my cheeks before I could stop them. His voice, it wasn't just words. It was love wrapped in lightning, mercy in thunder, and yet it shook me to my soul.
"Many shall see signs in the sky. Many shall hear warnings in dreams, but few will listen, because they love the world more than truth."
Then the sky tore open, and I saw it again. The great global trembling. One part of the earth was burning, another drowning. I saw buildings crumble not from earthquakes, but from within the foundations were corrupted. Smoke rose over cities not just from war, but from collapse. I saw rivers turning black, not from poison, but because they had ceased to flow, frozen, lifeless. A great silence blanketed the earth, and I heard weeping in many tongues. I saw children huddled in corners while screens glowed before them, whispering lies that looked like truth. I saw politicians screaming behind polished podiums, yet no one listened because the people had stopped believing in words. And then I saw something stranger, a great light cutting through the darkness. It wasn't a sun, it wasn't fire, it was the Word, and the Word was alive.
"My light shall pierce through deception. My remnant will rise not with swords, but with tears and prayer. And through them I shall awaken the nations."
Then I saw it, millions of believers hidden in humble places, lighting candles of truth. Small homes, dirty alleyways, rooftops like mine. Children, old men, factory workers, prisoners, all praying the same prayer. "Lord Jesus, reveal yourself." And one by one they shined, not because of religion, because of repentance. I saw a child lay hands on his dying mother, and she was healed. I saw a former gangster preach in the middle of a riot, and the entire crowd dropped to their knees. I saw a woman in Manila's slums raise her hands to heaven, and suddenly a flood of peace washed over her street. These were the ones marked, not by governments, not by digital chips, not by denomination, but by the Spirit.
The days of shaking will increase. The idols of men, wealth, science, power will crumble. But those who stand on me will never fall.
And then he showed me something that shattered my pride. I saw myself crying, begging, "Why me, Lord? I'm not worthy. I'm not learned. I'm no prophet." And he answered, not with anger, but with the most tender voice.
Because you were willing to be nothing, I can be everything through you.
I broke. Everything I had doubted, every moment of shame, every voice of mockery, it melted away. I woke up sobbing, and for the first time in weeks, I was not afraid of what was coming, because I had seen the end, and the end was not doom, it was glory. Later that week, I shared the full vision in a gathering that spilled out into the street. People brought chairs, stools, even plastic crates just to sit and listen. As I recounted what Jesus had shown me, silence fell like a holy blanket over the crowd. When I finished, I simply said, "If you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts." One man whispered, "So, there is hope." I looked him straight in the eye. "There's not just hope," I said. "There's a coming harvest." From that night on, I have been different, not perfect, but surrendered. The world may shake, it may rage, but I will stand, because the one who called me back from death is the same one calling you now.
Come, follow me. The door is still open, but not for long.
If you've made it this far, I want to thank you with all my heart, not just for listening to my story, but for opening your heart to what truly matters. This wasn't just a story about a man who died and came back. It was a wake-up call, a divine interruption, a message not just for me but for you.
The time is short. What you do now echoes in eternity.
This experience changed everything. It tore down my pride, my traditions, and my false sense of control. And in their place, God planted something far greater truth. Through death, I discovered life. Through darkness, I saw the light. And through doubt, I found a savior. So here's the question I leave with you. What if what you believe is comfortable, but not true? Would you still choose it? Or would you have the courage to seek truth no matter the cost? If this story stirred something in you, even a little, then I invite you to take the next step, not just emotionally, but spiritually. Pray. Ask Jesus to reveal himself to you. Open your heart. Test what you've heard. Seek with the sincerity. And share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you felt, what you saw, what you're questioning now. If you're searching, you are not alone. Thousands are waking up across the world. And if you want to see more stories like this, more real encounters, more voices from the edge of eternity, then subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell icon, like the video. Help us spread the truth that sets people free. This is not the end. It's only the beginning. Because as long as we still breathe, there is still time to turn, to rise, to awaken. So don't scroll past this moment. Let it mark you.
I am the way, the truth, and the life, and I am waiting for you.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeking. And thank you for being part of this journey of faith, truth, and transformation. This is Pinoy Faith Stories. And together, we'll keep sharing the light. God bless you all. Until the next story.